the Russians are now winning in a serious way on the battlefield. If you look at what's happening there, if anything, this just plays to Putin's position, not to Trump's position tomorrow.
So John Mearsheimer recently made a strong case to Andrew Napolitano that Trump will be outsmarted and outfoxed by Vladimir Putin in Alaska today over the potential for a roadmap to peace in Ukraine. Now, if I know Mearsheimer, this isn't going to be just sensationalism or hyperbole. He's going to back it up with tangible military factors that support his case. So let's get into it. Let's see what he has to say. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
In Alaska, big picture, is this substantive or is it just shadow play, the meeting between Trump and Putin?
I think it's mainly shadow play. If we're talking about an agreement between Putin and Trump that's going to lead to shutting down this war, I don't see how that's possible because the two sides are so far apart. Russia has a set of non-negotiable demands that the Ukrainians categorically reject, that the Europeans categorically reject, that many people around Trump categorically reject. And therefore, it's just hard to see how Trump, who's shown no evidence that he accepts those Russian demands, is going to reach some sort of meaningful agreement. So all you have here is a lot of shadow boxing. It's all rather pointless.
Yeah, I got to mostly agree with them. All the talk right now is about a territorial exchange and the potential for that. Both the Ukrainians and Russians seem to be dug in against those things, both claiming that their constitutions recognize those regions as theirs and not wanting to back away from that. You know, that wouldn't stop Trump from, discarding Zelensky completely and just shutting this thing down if Zelensky wasn't willing to accept any of them. But I don't think he's going to be willing to do that. And really at the heart of this thing and at the crux of this thing from the start, and this has always been true if you look back about the documented evidence of this war, is Putin's desire is no Ukraine in NATO. Trump would have to say that. It would have to be demilitarized. You'd have to take NATO resources and intelligence out of Ukraine and a denazification campaign. That is what would have to be acknowledged, as well as the possessions that Russia has now generally taken. Now, there is some evidence to suggest, hey, maybe they'd flirt with exchanging territory here and there, but I don't think that's at the heart of this thing, for all the reasons that Mearsheimer just described, too.
So Trump, apparently, according to people on the phone call, well, one of whom is the president of France, the other of whom is the prime minister of Great Britain, purportedly told the Europeans he agrees with them. Now, we know what their position is. If he agrees with the European position, which is a ceasefire must precede anything else, and Ukraine has the right to join NATO, and Crimea and the Oblasts are really part of Ukraine. This is almost ridiculous to say this. If he truly told the Europeans that, he's either lying or has a fundamental misunderstanding of how to deal with Putin.
Well, I mean, you know how Trump operates. He says one thing 1 minute, and the next minute he says the opposite. If you read the reports on what he told the Europeans yesterday, apparently he said that he was going to push for a ceasefire. But today he is saying that he's interested not in a ceasefire, but he's interested in a real deal. He wants to end the war.
That is how Trump behaves almost all the time, by the way. That hasn't escaped the notice of anyone.
You can only do one of those two things. And he says one thing one day and a different thing the next day. So who knows exactly what his position is going to be going into these talks. But the fact is, he's never going to agree to the principal Russian demands. And until he comes to agree with those demands, you're not going to get a meaningful agreement between Putin and Trump.
Agreed. You need a reverse Bucharest summit, unlike the one that George W. Bush gave us in 2008, where he went over to Bucharest and said, categorically, Ukraine and Georgia will be part of NATO. There needs to be the opposite of that from Trump. He needs to declare soundly explicitly, overtly, and loudly that Ukraine will not be part of NATO. That is the key factor here that it doesn't seem like the Trump administration is willing to do because, as I've described many other times in many other videos, the military-industrial complex still exists regardless of who you vote for. And they still have lobbying power to keep this war going, much like they did in Afghanistan and Iraq, where it was lucrative for them. They got billions of dollars from the U.S. tax base, just like they are now for this proxy war with a nuclear power where the stakes are even higher.
And then you want to understand that's not the end of the story because there are more than two players in this game. The other two players are the Ukrainians and the Europeans. And even if Trump and Putin were to agree, the other two wouldn't agree with the deal that the two of them worked out.
Yesterday, he threatened Russia. Now, I don't know if this is a serious threat. I'll play it for you. I don't know if it's for American domestic political consumption. I don't know if he thought it through. He's saying it in a matter-of-fact way, but he does use the phrase. It's the last two words of the clip, and it's only 16 seconds. Severe consequences. Chris, cut number 4.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
How does the Kremlin view a statement like that?
The same way you and I do, as not very serious and indicative of the fact that he's all over the map. Let's just talk about why we're having this meeting, right? 2 weeks ago, nobody thought a meeting like this was possible because the two sides were miles apart. So the question you want to ask yourself is, why are we having this meeting tomorrow? And the answer is that Trump had previously threatened to levy secondary sanctions on Russia, which meant that India and China, in all likelihood, would be clobbered. And that was going to happen on August 8th. But as we inched towards the August 8th date, he came to realize that he did not want to do that.
Yeah, and he should have, not even flirted with the idea, especially if you want to pull India, a BRICS country, more closer to you. It's not like Modi and Trump didn't have good relations in his first term. They did. They considered each other friends, and relations between the U.S. and India were very good for a BRICS country. So by slapping those secondary tariffs on India simply for trading with Russia would have alienated that kind of relationship for sure. So it was a stupid idea to begin with. And it's not like this changed the conditions on the battlefield. So it's only because Trump led up on that rhetoric a little bit that this meeting is happening.
So he sent Steve Witkoff scurrying off to Moscow to ask Putin to have this meeting. It came out of nowhere. Putin, of course, agreed to the meeting, because he understood the pickle that Trump was in. So we get the meeting, and on August 8th, there were no secondary sanctions. So Trump solved the problem. But here he is in the clip that you just showed talking about sanctions again. He just gotten out of the pickle, and now he's getting back into the pickle.
Yeah, this is a cycle that Trump always goes through. He always ramps up the stupid rhetoric at times. I guess he takes it from The Art of the Deal. I have read that book, and his mentality is, you say bellicose things and make big threats in hopes that your rival will come to the table with a better bargain. But it's been, 8, 9, more than a dozen cycles of this with Russia that it's not really playing out the same way it did in New York's real estate market, is it? We're still dumping money into this country when America just passed the $37 trillion debt threshold. This isn't America first. It's clearly Ukraine first and military-industrial complex first, but that doesn't matter. So again, Mearsheimer's right. He has to come to the table and do what's realistic to end this war, not just threaten idle sanctions. It's never worked.
This is just hard to understand. Why is he threatening very severe sanctions when that card is not worth playing? And in fact, it's just going to lead to all sorts of trouble because he can't employ it against the Chinese. They have too much coercive leverage. The Indians have told him that they will not play along. And if anything, what this is going to do, it's going to drive the Indians into the arms of the Russians.
Exactly. That's the biggest threat, too. And it's not like the U.S. hasn't driven Syria and Iran closer to the Russians and Chinese as well in that BRICS alliance. And, you're really playing with a new Cold War here if you're not dove into that headfirst already, which I kind of think we already are. But to solidify that alliance by pushing India closer to China, like you already pushed Russia so much closer to China, it's a factor of this war that almost no one talks about, but it has a lot of geopolitical ramifications for the future. And I don't want to inflame tensions with 3 nuclear powers rather than 2. I'd rather have 2 if I have to have any at all, and I don't want any at all.
Is that in our interest? Of course not.
I mean, what cards does Trump have to play, with the possible exception of the 350 billion? I don't know if it's dollars or rubles, but it's roughly 350 billion translated into dollars in Russian assets, frozen or seized or stolen, however you want to characterize it, in European and American banks. Does he have any other cards to play?
He has no cards to play. I mean, if he had cards to play, he would have played them already. Or if he hadn't played them, Joe Biden would have played them before. What could he do? There's all this talk about increasing armaments to Ukraine. We've been down this road probably 50 times. There's nothing we can do there. We've got an empty cupboard for the most part. And with regard to sanctions, as I just said, and countless people have said on your show, and countless people have said in other places, that's not a meaningful card to play. And by the way, what we haven't talked about is the fact that the Russians are now winning in a serious way on the battlefield. If you look at what's happening there, if anything, this just plays to Putin's position, not to Trump's position tomorrow.
Putin has never changed his demands.
Yeah, that's right. Not much has changed in terms of the Russian demands. We've known that for over a decade. We've known that since the Niet means Niet memo that William Burns, who became the CIA director under Biden, but at the time was the ambassador to Russia under Condoleezza Rice, writing back to Condoleezza Rice saying, hey, I've talked to all the political factions here. You know what the reddest of red lines is? Flirting with Ukraine and NATO and saying that Ukraine is going to be part of NATO. No one accepts that, and that will guarantee a future conflict with Russia. If you don't believe me, read that memo, thanks to the great Julian Assange, that was declassified for us all to see now. But that's exactly true, and that's where we're at here. If those demands aren't shifted, those demands aren't accepted to some extent by Trump, we're not going to have a peace.
Going back to the start of the special military operation, those demands, correct me if I'm wrong, Professor, were incorporated in the Istanbul Agreement, which was every page of which was initialed by the Russian and Ukrainian negotiators. And we know what happened with that. Joe Biden and Boris Johnson got their hands on it. So he's never changed his demands. And today, August 14th, the day before the gathering in Alaska, he is in an infinitely stronger position because of the devastating effects that his military has visited upon the Ukrainian military. Your and my colleague and friend, Colonel McGregor, says the Ukrainian military is virtually obliterated in large measure because of the last movement of Russian troops in the past week.
Yeah, they've renewed the offensive, and they already held like 85 or 90% of the Donbass to begin with. So all this propaganda that, Ukraine was winning the war, they're on the cusp of this thing, despite not giving any victory conditions. And, you'd think a victory condition might be taking back the 4 oblasts that they have largely lost. But it's not that. They went from Russia's running out of ammunition to Putin's going to be cooed by a general to, the Ukrainians had this in their grasp. And every step of this thing has been complete farcical baloney, the same kind of baloney that we've taken from the CIA and the warmongers and the war party the entire lifetime of mine, essentially.
Agreed?
Yeah, I think that the Ukrainians are in deep trouble, and Colonel McGregor is correct. And again, this plays to Trump's advantage, Putin's advantage in a really big way tomorrow. Putin has no reason to want to compromise at this point in time, given events on the battlefield.
I totally agree. So basically, it's all theatrics from Trump pivoting to issues that aren't at the crux of this matter, aren't at the heart of it, aren't important to solving it, like Ukraine's status in NATO, demilitarization of NATO assets in Ukraine, and denazification. It's not even talked about by Trump. Instead, he talks about territorial changes that both sides, again, seem dug in on the heels over, that they won't budge on it. And even if they will budge on it, again, it's not at the heart of this conflict. You can take a look at the documented evidence for what is at the heart of this conflict. They talked about it a little bit, but Putin's draft treaty that he sent to NATO's General Secretary in December of 2021, where he said, hey, if you just put it in writing that Ukraine won't be part of NATO and these other things like Donetsk and Luhansk will be independent, which should have happened under the Minsk Accords, by the way, that the U.S. and Ukraine violated, then I won't invade Ukraine. And guess what? Jens Stoltenberg, is he a man of peace? No, he wasn't. He was a man of war. He wanted this conflict to continue. He laughed at it and said, there's no way I'm signing this peace. There's no way I'm putting this in writing from NATO that is true, that Ukraine won't be part of NATO. And it's because of that Putin invaded. But it's helpful to understand, too, that this was in year 7 of a 7-year civil war that was already taking place, with Ukraine's government shelling the Donbass region, Donbass villages there where innocents died. That's why the Minsk Accords were created in the first place, the first one in 2014 and the second one in 2015, to try to grant those regions political autonomy. And Ukraine agreed to that, but never put it into motion. They never enacted what it would take to enforce the Minsk II Accords. And you have people like Angela Merkel from Germany saying, yeah, we never intended to push them to do that. And, that's evident, because the U.S. always wanted an empire-building scheme against Russia. They have since the 90s. It's been a bipartisan thing from Clinton onward. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump have always pursued this path to some regard. Now, sometimes Trump's rhetoric was good, but again, it doesn't seem like he's willing to do what it takes to end this war. And that means a reverse Bucharest summit. Ukraine won't be part of NATO. That's what we need. It's what Trump isn't willing to do. I don't expect that to come out of this, by the way, in this conference, but we'll have to see. I'd love to eat crow on it. I love to be surprised by, hey, they actually reached a peace with or without Zelensky, that Zelensky's hand would be forced. Well, if Zelensky doesn't agree to it, then the U.S. is out of this thing completely. That's ideal from an America first perspective, an America only perspective, especially when we're $37 trillion in debt over this America last foreign policy. But that's where we're at. I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below. Do you agree with Mearsheimer? Do you think Putin will outsmart Trump in Alaska? Do you think anything positive will come from this, whether a ceasefire or an actual peace? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Judge Napolitano. Great podcast. Really appreciated this interview. Mearsheimer is always awesome on it. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all my videos that are members only before they go live to the general public on the channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you next one.